All right, Shabbos, let us begin. A beautiful daf ahead of us. They were actually Mirza Hashem B'Shat Tov Mitzlachos finishing the parak today. Today's daf is Mem Zayin 47. We are picking up on Mem Vav Amud Beis 46b. And we are picking up Rami Le Abayi Le Rav Yosef. It is 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom. Our shir this morning is dedicated by our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan, Frank and Debbie Spector, with deep gratitude to the entire Kehillah. Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating the Shiurim and Drashos this month in memory of Paul's father, Shmuel ben Zechariah, his mother Sarah Bas Avram, great-grandmother Cyril Bas Rab Dov, and today's Daf Yomi dedicated by Greg and Rachel Levitan in memory of Sylvia Schreiber, Sarah Gittel Bas Yisrael Baruch Zichrona Livracha. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an Aliyah, the families in Nechama. We thank all of the Mishpachos for their sponsorships. And Abosai, with that, let us begin. With that, we're continuing for Arielman Yashikoach on the background. Mamish, it looks like Eretz Yisrael and Sira Sa'omer together. And I don't know how you do it, but you're like my Zoom Rebbe. It's incredible, like an inspiration. So with that, let us begin. So the Gemara says as follows. Remember, we're still continuing on the halachas. Yes, that is true. Let's keep the sibling rivalry off the chat over here. So we continue in our machlokes, or in our discussion. Although I just have to say this, I do think Said Haken still has it. I'm saying to Mamish, he's each of us are at home, whatever background you want. He's in the base medrash, and everybody is seated, attentive there. So that's all right. So anyway, the Gemara says as follows: we're still dealing with the machlokes Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Shimon regarding muktzah, and focusing specifically on the nature of muktzah. We have Rabbi Shimon's model, a very permissive and very kind of like open-ended muktzah. We have Rabbi Huda, a much more restrictive form of muktzah. So Gemara is continuing on this discussion. Rami le Abaye le Rav Yosef. So Abaye posed the question to Rav Yosef. Mi amar Reb Shimon kavsa mutul taltala, kavsa in lo kavsa lo. So we'll say up until now we've been focusing on the idea that Rabbi Shimon pretty much only has one type or one situation where muktzah is truly problematic, and let me say it differently. Rabbi Shimon holds that halacha l'maisa, once the nair goes out, you are permitted to go ahead and carry it. But when the nair is lit, even Rabbi Shimon agrees that you are not permitted to carry the nair. Now, what's the reason for that? So the Gemara says, "My taima, tilma bahadi dinaket le kafsa." Now, it must be because Rabbi Shimon is concerned that if halacha l'maisa, you go ahead and you carry the nair, what may occur? You may come to go ahead and extinguish that nair. Or you'll be carrying it, and by carrying it inadvertently, you may come to extinguish the nair. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon says, while it is lit, the nair will be muktzah. So the Gemara says, but 1 second. But here's the problem with that. Rabbi Shimon is on record as saying that a davar shenu miskavin, if you perform a malacha without intent, then ultimately, again, that is mutter. This sanya, because we learned Rabbi Shimon Omer, gorer adam kise mita v'safsal ubilvad shliis kavin lasos charetz. After we learned in the Brayso, we've seen this quoted many times, that on Shabbos a person is permitted to drag a seat, a bed, or a bench, even across a dirt area, as long as his intention is not to make a furrow. So we'll say, so again, now leaving aside Psik Reisha, Davar Shenu Miskavin, we'll talk about these items a little bit later, but the idea that the Gemara is expressing over here is you could drag your bench from one side, from point A to point B, even though again you may end up going and making a furrow. Now making a furrow is a problem of choresh, of plowing on Shabbos. And yet Rabbi Shimon says because that's not your intent, ultimately, again, it's not a problem to move the bench. So why wouldn't we say the same thing over here? Rabbi Shimon should allow you to go ahead and carry the candle. Because what's the worst case scenario? That you end up extinguishing the candle, but that wasn't your intent. So because of the davar shenu miskavin, Rabbi Shimon should say that it's mutter. To which the Gemara says something really quite fascinating. Kol heichad dechi mechavein ika isura d'oraisa, kilo mechavein gaz Rabbi Shimon d'Rabbanan. Supposed to what we say is like this: any situation where intentionality would create an isra d'oraisa, Rabbi Shimon holds that even unintentional act is asr midrabanan. Kol heicha dechi mechavein ika isura d'Rabbanan. But wherever intentionality would only yield a rabbinic prohibition, kilo mechavin shari Rabbi Shimon lechatchila. Therefore, where there's no intention, Rabbi Shimon says it's mutter lechatchila. So this is really quite fascinating. So let's contrast the cases. I will say, in the case of the furrow, if you were to drag a bench, right? If you were to drag a bench from point A to point B, and even if you were to intentionally create a furrow, what would be the halacha? That's only an Issur D'Rabbanan, right? Not only that's an Issur D'Rabbanan, not an Issur D'Oraisa. Why not? Because they will say to violate the Issur D'Oraisa of Charisha, of digging a furrow, of working the land, you have to do so with farming instruments, right? With a shovel, with a spade, with something, not with a bench. So because number one, you're doing it in a non-normative act, even if you were to intentionally dig a furrow with the bench, that'll only be Asr Midrabanan. So Rabbi Shimon holds that whenever intentionality only yields an Isser D'Rabbanan, so therefore again, unintentional commission of the act will be mutter. That's Rabbi Shimon allows you to move the bench. But in the case of the candle, if you were to go ahead and intentionally extinguish it, that would be an Isser D'Oraisa of Kibui, right? That's a biblical prohibition. So because that would be a biblical prohibition, therefore what? Rabbi Shimon is gozer, and he says that midrabanan it is aser. So they both say that's why it sounds like Rabbi Shimon, although he'll permit you to move the nair after it extinguished, halacha lamaisa will say that you cannot go ahead and carry it while it is lit, out of concern that lamaisit will be extinguished. Because if you end up extinguishing it, even though if you ended up extinguishing it, it's a davar she'eino miskavein, right? It's unintentional, and therefore it's only midrabanan. But since in this case, if you were to do it intentionally, it's asr midoraisa. Rabbi Shimon says therefore it's asr midrabanan even unintentionally. Therefore you can't move the nair while it is lit. Okay, so massive Rava raises a kasha. Mochri ksus. So we'll say if you have people who are selling garments, right? They're selling garments, they're selling clothing. The problem is the clothing has shatnez. So mochrei ksus, mochrin kidarka, are permitted to go ahead and sell in the normal fashion. Now we'll say, normal fashion means as follows. The way apparently clothing merchants used to sell their wares is that you would put on the garment. So you put on the garment and you would yell out, shirt for sale, jacket for sale, and you would be modeling it essentially for anyone who passed by. So the halacha is, Rava says, even though the clothing possesses shatnez, you can still go ahead and sell it in the normative fashion. Obilvad shelo yiskaven b'chama mipnei achama u'b'geshamim mipnei geshamim. As long as you don't have in mind to benefit from the clothing. In other words, they both say, you don't have in mind that when it's hot outside, that the clothing is shielding you from the sun, or when it's raining, that it's shielding you from the rain. So in other words, you could go ahead and wear the clothing, for the express purpose of modeling the clothing to sell. But what you can't do is get actual clothing benefit from the clothing, as that would be benefiting from shatnez. That's nuin, but those who were exceptionally modest, mafshilin b'makya lacharehen. But the modest ones would not even wear the clothing. Instead, what would they do? They would put the clothing on a stick and hold the stick in back of them, thereby showing their wares, but not wearing the shatnez. Ay v'ha dechi mechavin iser da'oraisa ika kilo mechavin shari Rabbi Shimon lechatchila. But here's a problem: the model that you just espoused before. Right? The model you just espoused before is the concept that according to Rabbi Shimon, halacha l'maisa, when something is aser, when you have something which, if done intentionally, creates an iser d'oraisa, so therefore, even if you do the act unintentionally, it'll be aser midrabanan. So this case over here, if you were to intentionally put on the clothing, it would halacha l'maisa be an Isur D'Oraisa. If that's the case, then even when you're doing it unintentionally, in other words, here, if I'm putting on the clothing to just hack the wares, right? So then at the end of the day, I'm not intentionally getting hana from shatnez, but yet it should still be aser midrabanan. Yet over here, Rabbi Shimon is saying that it's totally mutter. So what's the pshat? What we're doing now is we're looping back. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon's prohibition to go ahead and carry the nair when it's lit must be based on something else. Therefore, Ella Amarava, top of Mem Zayin, Hanach Lener. Hanach Lener Shemen Upsila, Hoil Dinaase Basis Ledavar Ha'aser. So we'll say at the end of the day, the reason you cannot carry the Ner, says the Gemara, is because the Ner itself becomes a basis, a base, to something which is prohibited. I will say what's prohibited? It is the flame itself that is, you cannot handle a flame on Shabbos. Right? Why can't you handle a flame on Shabbos? The flame is muktzah, right? The flame itself is prohibited for use, therefore again renders it unfit for use, or you're unfit for handling, lest you come to extinguish it. So we'll say, salachically, according to Rabbi Shimon, we view the wick, the oil, and the ner, the earthenware vessel itself, all as the basis, all as the base, ultimately again for the actual flame itself. So because all of that becomes the base for the ner, therefore you can't handle it. That's Rabbi Shimon's logic. When the ner is lit, everything else, the wick, the oil, and the utensil itself, all become the basis, all become the base for the flame, and therefore cannot be used. Of course, that only applies when the flame is lit. Once the flame is extinguished, halacha lamaisa, there is no problem to go ahead and carry the utensil. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Amar Rabbi Ramunus. So we'll listen to this. So Rabbi Ramanus came along and he said the following: Li hiti Rabbi letaltel machta ba'afra. So Rabbi Ramanus comes and he gives testimony. So we'll say, so again, so what we just established is that according to Rabbi Shimon, we've already known this before. Rabbi Shimon allows you to carry a ner once it's extinguished. Why can't you carry it when it's lit? Ultimately, again, because the ner becomes what's called a basis ledavar ha'aser. The ner itself becomes a base to a prohibited item, the prohibited item being the flame itself. Good. Rabbi Ramanus now gives testimony. And what does he say? Li hiti Rabbi letalto machta ba'afra. Rabbi allowed me to carry. Machta literally is like a pan, but not like a frying pan. If you could imagine like the pan that the Kohen Gadol would use to carry the incense in the Beis Hamikdash, right? So it's kind of like a short shovel, right? So you would have a longer handle, and there would be like a pan like thing at the end. So they would carry incense on this. So look at Rashi. Amar Rabbi Ramanus li hit Rabbi letaltal machta shalavona ba'afra. Kasakadaitcha ba'afra im afra kamar she'ifer muktzah v'lo hayu tzrichin bo. Vashmo'inon da'agav machta deleka Torah's kliyala teltala im afra. So let's listen to this. So Ramana says as follows: Rabbi would allow me to carry this pan. Now, what would be in this pan? So you would go ahead and you would have incense. But there would also be afra, there would be ashes, or really like dust. So there would be, now incense on Shabbos, right? Incense on Shabbos is fine, generates nice smell. The issue over here is Rabbi Ramanus is carrying a shovel or a pan with items that are muktzah on it. So Rabbi is allowing me to go ahead and carry the pan, even though again the afer, right? Even though again the ashes are here. So the Gemara, Rabbi Asi, Miyamar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan really permit this? V'hatanan, we learned. Notel Adam. So we'll say. So I just want to be clear. Rabbi Ramanus seems to be giving testimony that Rabbi allowed him to carry a pan with muktzah items on it. All there is the afer in this pan, the ashes or the dirt in this pan, and yet Rabbi Ramanus is saying, Rabbi allowed me to carry this on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, is this possible that Rabbi Yochanan is quoting this lahalacha? After all, we learned Batanan, Notel Adam beno va'evan biyado. It was an interesting halacha. You are permitted to pick up your child if your child is holding something muktzah. Let's say my child is holding a stone on Shabbos. The stone is muktzah. I can pick up my child even though, again, my child is holding something muktzah. O kalkala va'evan besocha. Or you could pick up a basket, even though what? There is a stone inside of the basket. Now, va'amara bar bachana am Rabbi Yochanan bekalkala malea peros askinan. They will say, when can you pick up a basket if there's a stone in the basket? That's only if what? there's fruit in the basket as well. Now I will say, Taima de ispeperi, hot less baperi low. So that's only true if what? That's only true if halacha lemaisa, there are peiros inside of the basket. If there are no peiros, then you can't go ahead and lift the basket with the stone. I will say, so just to appreciate what's happening over here. A basket is considered to be a basis, a base to its contents. So what the Gemara is saying is like this. If you have a basket that has a stone in it, so that basket is a basis ladavar ha'aser. It is a base to something which is prohibited, right? Because remember again, the stone itself is muktzah. So if the basket is a base to the stone, then halacha lemaisa, the basket is muktzah as well. So the Gemara is suggesting, when do we allow you to move a basket with a stone? That's only if there's fruit inside the basket as well. Because if there's fruit inside of the basket, then the basket becomes what's called a basis ladavar ha'aser uledavar hamutar. The basket becomes then a base to something that is permitted and prohibited. And as long as the basket has something permitted inside of it as well, then halacha l'maisi, you are permitted to go ahead and move it. So says the Gemara, and that is halacha l'maisa, right? In general, whenever you have a basis, a base, if all the basis supports or contains is something itself that is muktzah, the entire basis becomes muktzah. If the basis, however, the base contains something that is muktzah and mutar, you are permitted to go ahead and move the base by dint, right? As a result, ultimately, again, of the davar hamutar. So says the Gemara, Ishtomim kisha chada. So Rabbi Romanos did not know how to answer this. Rabbi Chanina didn't know how to answer this. So Shlomo means they were quiet. It's a good kasha. So in other words, how was Rabbi Romanos? It's not really Rabbi Romanos. It's really Rabbi Chanina. I said how did Rabbi permit Rabbi Romanos to go ahead and carry the pan if all the pan contained was ash? If all it contained was ash, then lamaisa halacha lamaisa, it should be prohibited to carry the pan. So the Gemara says, "Va'amar hachanami de isba kartin." What's the case, Rabbosai? The case was where there wasn't just ash, but rather again there were some pieces of incense that were still left in that fire pan as well. Now, remember again, a piece of incense is totally mutter, right? You could take the piece of incense on Shabbos, you could smell it. It's not a problem. You can't burn it, obviously, but you could smell it. What they're answering is that Rabbi Romanos was permitted to carry a pan that not only had ash, but ultimately again had pieces of incense as well. Therefore, the pan itself was a basis l'davar ha'aser v'hamutar. It was a base of something prohibited and permitted, just like the basket that has a stone but also has fruit and therefore can be moved on Shabbos. Amar Abaye says, 1 second. Kartin be Rabbi Michashivi. Most remember again, Rabbi was very wealthy. Rashi says he was the nasi. So with one little I don't know what the right word is, one little piece of incense be something significant to Rabbi? So b'pashtos, the answer to that, of course, is no. So we'll say, so in general, what we're assuming is as follows. In order for the basis to be considered supporting and serving the davar hamutar, the permitted item has to be what? Has to be something of significance. So if you have a basket and there's a stone, but there's also fruit are significant. But lamaisa, if Rabbi Romanos is carrying a pan, right, the fire pan, and there's ash in it, and there's a little kernel or a little piece of incense, is that significant enough to make the pan into a basis ladavar ha'aser v'hamutar? After all, we learned the chitema chazulaniim. Well, maybe you'll say, well, even though for Rebbe the one little piece of incense doesn't really make all that much difference, for aniyim, for poor people, it would make a difference. For a pauper, one little piece of incense is significant. So the Gemara says, here's the problem. V'hatanya, big de aniyim la'aniyim, big de ashirim la'ashirim. Remember again, we spoke about this extensively, that clothing is makabel tuma. Now, both sides, you could have different shiurim. For an ani, for example, a piece of fabric that's 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths is already significant and is makabel tuma. Yet for ashirim, for someone who is wealthier, a piece of fabric 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths is totally irrelevant and unusable. It is only a piece of fabric that is 3 tfachim by 3 tfachim or more that has significance for the ashir. So also you see something very interesting, that when it comes to the halachas of tumas begadim, the ability for clothing to go ahead and become tameh, that is a relative din, right? That is a relative din that only applies to something that is significant for you based on your station. So if I'm an ashir, then ultimately, again, a piece of fabric, 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, is not mekabel tumah. It does nothing for me. So that's what it means when it says, big aniyim le'aniyim, the clothing for the poor, right, are mekabel tumah, in accordance with the standards for the poor. Big ashirim le'ashirim. And for the rich, it is only clothing that is significant for them that is mekabel tumah. Aval da'aniyim la'ashirim lo, but the clothing of the poor are not mekabel tumah for the rich. So, for example, if you have a wealthy person who has a piece of material that is 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, that piece of material does not become tameh, or is not mekabel tumah. So, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa will say that when determining quote-unquote significance is relative and subjective. Therefore, going back for just a moment, when it comes to Rebbe, the fact that Rebbe Romanos has a little kernel of incense in his fire pan, that's irrelevant. Because for Rebbe, one little kernel of incense would be insignificant. So because for Rebbe that be insignificant, that shouldn't make the fire pan into a basis ledavar ha'aser v'ha'muter. To which the Gemara says, Ela Amar Abaye, Midi dehavi agraf shalrei. So we'll say, this is incredible. So Abaye says, you're right. The truth is, why was Rabbi Ramanos permitted to go ahead and transport the shovel? Because the shovel was literally like graf shalrei. I will say, graf shalrei literally means a bedpan, right? Graf means a receptacle, rei means excrement. So we'll say, what's the halacha? You are permitted to go ahead on Shabbos and remove a graf shalrei, right? You're permitted to go ahead and remove a bedpan. We'll say, why are you permitted to remove if you think about this, why are you permitted to remove a bedpan on Shabbos? After all, again, it's muktzah. It has no use. So we'll say, so Rashi explains, ultimately, again, because it is disgusting, right? Because ma'is alav liroso, it's disgusting for me to have to look at it. Therefore, and again, it could have an odor as well. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, essentially, the rabbis relaxed the law of muktzah to allow the removal of the bedpan. And I will say, just so you understand, this is perhaps one of the most important hilchos muktzah that we have. Why? Because I will say we don't have to take a show of hands, but again, we take out the garbage on Shabbos, right? Why allowed to take out the garbage on Shabbos? After all, again, garbage, the ein muktzah gedola mizo, right? That's muktzah. So I'm permitted to take out the garbage on Shabbos, graf shalrei. Because for most of us, it's disgusting to have a full garbage lying around on Shabbos. So I'm permitted to take the garbage from inside, even though, again, the garbage is not lying on my floor. Hopefully, again, it's in a garbage can. But again, if it's full, it's not nice for a person to have Shabbos with a full garbage can. So I'm permitted to take the garbage from inside my house to outside my house. That's muktzah, that's graf shalrei. It's graf shalrei. So therefore the Gemara says, perhaps the reason ultimately, again, why Rabbi Romanos was permitted to remove the fire pan on Shabbos was because it was disgusting for Rebbe to have that garbage, right, the ash, left over in his house. So he told Rabbi Romanos, take out the trash, graf shalrei. So the Gemara says, here's the problem. Ella Amarava, shtei tshuvas b'dav. Rava says there's 2 problems with that answer. Number 1, chada, graf shalrei mas v'halamas. Number 1, we'll say graf shalrei usually refers to something that is disgusting, right? Like a bedpan filled with excrement or garbage, right? But a fire pan, right? A fire pan just filled ultimately again with some ash, that doesn't seem to be something that would be so disturbing that it requires the heter of graf shalrei. Not only that, v'od, graf shalrei migli v'haim nichsi. Further, I will say, a graf shalrei, part of the reason you could go ahead and remove the bedpan is because it's open and exposed. But I will say, again, interestingly enough, these fire pans that were used for incense were usually covered. Rashi points out that usually what they would do is they would have the pan, then there'd be a covering over the pan. The covering would have holes to allow the aroma to escape. but it's covered. So meaning when the incense finishes burning, it's not like you're sitting there looking at the ash. The ash itself is totally covered. Ela Amarava ki havinan be Rav Nachman. So Rava said as follows: Ki havinan be Rav Nachman hava mitaltalinon kinuna agav kitma va'af agav diika ala shivreit. So I'll say in a similar story, Rava says that when we were in the house of Rav Rav says when we were in the house of Rav Nachman, we carried the kinura. Rashi says klina choshes shemavin boas or lifnei asram leischanim. So we'll say this would be a brass utensil, a brass, almost like a shovel type item as well, a brass utensil. Well, actually, I take that back. Not really a shovel, more like I guess this is what we call like the Talmudic portable heater. So you would go ahead and you would have a utensil that would have a cleaner chodesh mevinas, or they bring the fire before noble people to go ahead and warm themselves. So watch this. So Rava said, when I was in the house of Rav Nachman, I would go ahead and bring the kinuna agav kitma, va'af agav diikale shivra eitim. Look at Rashi. Agav kitma sheyitzrichin laafro lechasos rok otsoa. So let's listen to this. So obviously, when this portable heater is burning, you can't move it because there's a fire. But once it goes out, it would have inside of it ash. Now, the ash was often used to go ahead and cover up saliva or cover up excrement. So Rava says, I used to carry this utensil in the house of Rav Nachman, and they would use because the ash was usable on Shabbos. Now, what else was in there? There were wood chips, because remember again, the way they would generate the heat was by burning wood. There would be some leftover wood chips. Now, the wood chips themselves were totally unusable on Shabbos. Yet, I still went ahead and carried the utensil. So the Gemara says, what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, so now, interestingly enough, what is this being compared to? This is being compared to the case of the basket with the fruit and the stone, right? The basket that becomes the basis can be moved, even though it has a stone, as long as what? As long as it has usable fruit inside of it as well. So Bepashas, what's happening over here is that Rav is saying that since I used to carry this utensil, because the ash was something that was usable, even though what? Even though halacha l'maisa, there were wood chips in there which were unusable. So this is a basis l'davar ha'aser v'hamoter, and therefore it can be moved on Shabbos. So says the Gemara, Meisvei v'shavin shem yesh ba shivrei psila shaz l'taltal. So we'll say, we learned that both Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Huda agreed that halacha l'maisa, if there's leftover wick in your candle, even after the candle goes out, that l'maisa you can't move the candle. So what's going on over here? Amar Abaye bigalil shanu. So Abaye says that was in the galil, because in the galil, ultimately again, apparently flax was very hard to come by, and therefore halacha l'maisa, leftover wicks were at a premium. Right? Leftover wicks were considered to be something very important, and therefore the item was still considered muktzah even after the fire went out. Levi bar Shmuel, Ashkechinu l'Rabbi Abba l'Rav Huna bar Chia, Davokhaimia Pischa de Rav Huna. Amr lehu, Mal. So we'll say. So just if we pause here for just a moment, what comes out from this discussion is the concept of basis. So halacha l'maisa. So exactly, so the Gemara doesn't give exact clarity on some of these cases. But for our purposes, what does come out is as follows. Two very important halachas. Number one, if something is a basis, if something is a base to a muktzah item itself, then halacha l'maisa, the basis may not be moved. If something is a basis to a muktzah and a non-muktzah item, then halacha l'maisa, it can be moved. Number two, graf shalrei. If something is disgusting and it's sitting in your house, even though halacha l'maisa, its disgusting nature should itself make it muktzah, halacha l'maisa, you are permitted to remove graf sharei from your home. So you could take out the bedpan, you could go ahead and take out the garbage, and that is halacha l'maisa. Now the Gemara raises something very interesting. So what happens? They ask the following shayla: Ma'al lahachzer mita shal tarsiim b'Shabbos. So we'll say you have this tarsiim bed. What's a tarsium bed? Rashi says over here, tzarfei nechoshes o gardiim v'hocha me'ir le'ir le'malachta v'no sinima mitosh ha'pragim. It's very interesting. You have a bed that is made of parts. Can you assemble on Shabbos a bed which is made of multiple pieces. So the Gemara says, Amrule, they said to him, Shapir Dami, yes, you are permitted to do so. You are permitted to do so. So the Gemara says, Asa lekamed Rav Yehuda, Amri ha Rav Ushmal Darmi Tarvayu, Hamachzer mit shel Tarsim Shabbos, Chayiv Chatos. Okay, I will say, so we have a bit of a difference of opinion here. Right? So first opinion says absolutely no problem with going ahead and reassembling the Tarsim bed. Absolutely no problem, right? It's individual pieces. Now, we'll say obviously this must be the pieces just fit together, right? There's no like screws or hammering or anything like that, but rather you just take the independent pieces, you interlock them, and you're good to go. So one opinion says totally mutter. Other opinion says aser midaraisa. Meis having raised the kasha. Hamachsir kana menorah b'Shabbos chayiv chatos. Kana sayadin lo yachzir vim hichzir patra ava aser. So let's listen to this. So here's a kasha. If a person goes ahead and has a menorah, going back to yesterday's daf, you have a menorah made of pieces, and you go ahead and you put back one of the pieces on Shabbos, you are chayiv chatos. You're chayiv chatos. Now I will say, now there's interesting discussion over here. Exactly why are you chayiv chatos? Rashi points out over here is because of makeh bepatish. Makeh bepatish is kind of like an overarching malacha that says whenever you finish a constructive act, makeh bepatish literally means delivering the final hammer blow, completing an object. So whenever you go ahead and you deliver the final hammer blow, you complete something, that's called makeh bepatish. So if you have a menorah made of pieces and you put in the piece, that's called makeh bepatish, you're chayiv midoraisa. Makeh bepatish is malacha doraisa. There's an interesting sub-discussion about, others say it's bona, it's building. And I will say, now we'll talk about this in more depth, but there is a fundamental machlokes about whether or not the malacha of bona applies to utensils or not. Here the Gemara Rashi seems to be going with the idea that it does not apply to bona. Therefore, if you have a menorah made of pieces and you put back in one of the pieces, halacha lamaisa, that you are in violation of the malacha of makeh bepatish, delivering the final hammer blow. However, on the flip side, so the Gemara says, sayadin lo yachzir, what's very interesting. What happens if you can imagine, this is what was called a plasterer's rod. So you'd have people who would apply plaster. So what would they do? They'd have a very long brush. So we'll say, but the long brush had pieces. So you can make it longer, you can make it shorter. So Rashi points out something very interesting. Kana shal sayadin, Rashi says, Hatachin umalabdin abayis besid, yeshlen kana shal prakim, enotlin matlis barasha, v'sharm babesid, hamachay v'tachas abayis, kshu eitach milamal yefshar. We'll skip to Rashi Pater. Shein ze gamlo sharitzarach lachzor lefarku tamid. So we'll say, so there's a paintbrush, an extendable and retractable paintbrush. So because such a kli is used to constantly be taken apart and reassembled, right? Longer, shorter, longer, shorter, longer, shorter. So because of that halacha lemaisa, if you make it longer, you make it shorter on Shabbos, it is only aser midirabanan. Since that is a utensil that is constantly made to be shortened and lengthened, halacha lemaisa, you are not chayiv mid'oraisa for makeh bepatish, but rather it's only aser midirabanan. Rabbi Simai Omer, Karen Agula Chayiv, Karen Pshuta Pater. So we'll say this gets into the different types of musical horns they had. Rashi explains, we're not going to get into this. If you have a flat horn, ultimately again, and you go ahead and you assemble and disassemble it, it's pater. A rounded horn, you are chayiv. Inhu da'amru. So we'll say, so again, the point over here that you're seeing is what? We're trying to figure out what happens when you go ahead and you reassemble something on Shabbos. You have an item that is made of multiple parts, and you reassemble it. The shaila that was asked was specifically with the portable bed. You assemble the portable bed on Shabbos. What is the halacha? So again, we have two different opinions. One says asr midaraisa, one says mutter. So something very important, a principle that you do begin to see over here, Abosai, is the following. The Gemara seems to say, is that an item that is made to constantly be assembled and reassembled, there is no problem of makeh bepatish, of constructing such a utensil like that on Shabbos. So where this comes up for our purposes, the Gemara says, is in this long paintbrush, the plaster brush, that is constantly omed to be shortened and to be lengthened. So apparently the Gemara says in a case like that, halacha lamaisa, there is no problem of makeh bepatish. So we'll say, now watch this. So the Gemara says, inu da amar ki aitan. He was like the following tana. This sanya, melabno samita, ukaro samita, ulevachim shel sakivam, lo yachzir. So we'll say literally again. So melabno samita, and we'll say are like these little like bedpost shoes. So again, because beds often set on dirt floors, you don't want the dirt to erode the wood. So they would put like a little shoe, like you would have like a little insert. You would put the feet of the bed into the shoe. That's called malabno samita. The karo samita are the legs of the bed. Levachim shel sakivim. Rashi says ultimately, eitz katan k'mindaf shetokin bekeshes. This was like the notch on a crossbow. So what's the halacha? Lo yachzir. On Shabbos, you should not reassemble these items. Vim hechzir, but if you did reassemble them, then what? Pater aval aser. It is aser midrabanan. Aser midrabanan. So we'll say, so again, you see, these are all items that ultimately, again, are relatively easily assemblable, right? And are generally a bit loose fitting. So halacha l'maisa, ideally you shouldn't reassemble on Shabbos, but if you did, it is only aser midrabanan. However, v'lo yitaka, you shouldn't nail anything in. V'im taka chayiv chatas, and if you did nail something in, then you're chayiv chatas. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, im haya rafui mutar. If Rabbi said if you have an item that you're assembling, and halacha l'maisa, the pieces are loose fitting together, then it's permitted. So the Gemara says, Beirav Chama, Havamita Galalanisa, Havamahadrile Biyomatava. So we'll say, listen to this. So in the yeshiva of Rav, Yeshiva of Chama, they had this, what would they call this? Galilean mita. So it's a collapsible bed, right? Or a portable bed. So they would assemble it on Yom Tov. Amalei Ahumid Rabbanan L'Rava, Maidatech. Why is it that you permit assembling of this bed on Yom Tiv? If you want to say binyan minat sadhu, if you want to say that ultimately binyan minat sad means it's not a normative act of building, which means that halacha l'maisa, since you're not putting the pieces together with force, right, and it's really only like a loose fitting object, the pieces only fit together loosely. Nehid the isur d'oraisa leka isur d'rabanan mihaika. There is still what? Even if there's not an Isser D'Oraisa, there is still an Isser D'Rabanan. Amar le anik Reb Shimon Gamliel sirle the Amar im haya rafay muter. So he said, I heard Reb Shimon Gamliel, namely that if the pieces fit together loosely, then halacha l'maisa it is muter. And I will say that is indeed how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. If you have an item made of pieces, right, the collapsible item, a portable item made of pieces, you are permitted to assemble that on Shabbos if the pieces are generally loose fitting into each other. If, however, the pieces are tight-fitting to the point that ultimately, again, the item is pretty solid construction and it's not easy to go in and pull them apart, then the halacha is you do not assemble that on Shabbos. Good. Says the Mishnah. Both sides finish the parak. Says the Mishnah. Nosten kli tachas haner lekabel nitzotzos v'lo yitem l'socha mayim mivnei shu mechabes. We actually saw this quoted on Sunday. Namely, that if you have a nair, and you're scared that your nair sparks. So what can you do? You can go ahead and place a utensil right underneath or right next to your nair in order so that the utensil, the secondary utensil, catches the sparks that fly off the nair. Said chas v'shalom, one should not start a fire. However, lo yitim l'socha mayim neishu mechaber. What you can't do is put water into that secondary utensil. Because what's the problem if you put water? Then when the sparks come in, what's going to happen? They're going to be extinguished. So you can go ahead and put a secondary utensil to catch the sparks, but you may not put water in that secondary utensil because they will extinguish the sparks. Says the Gemara, so we saw this already on Sunday. How are you permitted to go ahead and set up that secondary utensil? Are you not going ahead and effectively what? Are you not going ahead and negating that kli's usefulness, right? To both think about this. If you have a kli that you're putting underneath the air to catch the sparks, you're effectively rendering that kli immobile and useless. Because now once it catches the sparks, it's going to have muktzah in it. Once it has muktzah in it, it's unusable. So we'll say, I just want to point this out because it's actually quite interesting. What exactly is the problem with going ahead and making a kli unusable on Shabbos? So we saw before. This was back on Mem Gimel. I don't know that I read this. Rashi points out something fascinating, that it could very well be that making a utensil unusable on Shabbos almost is like building, is almost like going ahead and like affixing that kli to its place with mortar, right? Which of course would be asr on Shabbos. So mevata kli behechano means you are negating it from use. It can no longer be moved, and therefore halacha l'maisa, it's as if you are affixing it in place. So says, excuse me, how are you permitted to do this? Sorry. Nitzotzos in ben mamash. So most a beautiful statement that we expounded on Sunday, and also did in the Emunah minute yesterday, which is sparks have no substance. So because sparks have no substance, therefore, what happens with the spark? The spark flies off the nair, falls into the utensil, and what happens when it's in the utensil? It just simply goes out. But lamaisa, there's no mamashas. There's no substance to it. Therefore, the secondary utensil can be moved on Shabbos. But what you can't do, Rabbi says, you can't go ahead and put water into the secondary utensil. Because if you did that, then halacha l'maisa, we go ahead and extinguish the sparks. Lema tnan stomach Rabbi Yossi. It must be that our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi. Because what does Rabbi Yossi say? Damar gorem liki boy aser. So it says we're going to see Rabbi Yossi holds that even causation, right? Even causing fire to go out in an indirect fashion is going to be aser on Shabbos. So we'll get into this fascinating discussion about what happens. What does a person do chas v'shalom if a fire breaks out in their home? And let's assume for a moment that the fire does not pose any mortal danger. Right? Let's assume that. Rabbi says that these halachas don't really apply to us because we have gas lines, we have electricity, and we also have neighbors. Right? But let's say, assuming for a moment that a person lives in a remote area, there's no gas line, there's no electricity. So chas v'shalom, a fire begins in a Ruvain's home. The only concern Mamish has is for the loss of money. So remember again, you can't do a malacha to save financial loss. So what happens if halacha l'maisa? If a fire starts, so we'll see. I don't want to get too into this now, but Rabbi Yossi, so there's a whole discussion over here about setting up earthenware vessels with water in them that will ultimately crack or burst when the fire gets near it. And when the earthenware vessels burst, what will happen? The water will come out and extinguish the fire. So Rabbi Yossi does not allow this. Right? Rabbi Yossi does not allow you to use the type of vessels that will burst with contact with fire, thereby allowing the water out. That's called gram kibui, causative extinguishing. You can't do that. So we'll say, so apparently it sounds like our Mishnah is saying the same thing. What does the Mishnah say? You can't put water in the secondary utensil that's going to catch the sparks, because then they'll go ahead and extinguish the sparks. So it must be that our Mishnah is reflecting the view of Rabbi Yossi. V'tizbara, but 1 second. Emar Rabbi Yossi b'Shabbos, be'erev Shabbos miyamar. Rabbi Yossi, remember again, when are you setting up this second utensil? We assume that you're setting it up on Erev Shabbos. When does Rabbi Yossi say you can't engage in a causative act of extinguishing a fire? That's on Shabbos itself. But Rabbi Yossi would seemingly allow you to set up a process on Erev Shabbos, even if that's going to result in a causative extinguishing on Shabbos itself. So the Gemara says, V'chitema hachinami b'Shabbos. Maybe you'll say the Mishnah is talking about Shabbos. The Mishnah is telling you that you can't put water in the secondary utensil on Shabbos itself. But is that true? V'atanya, we learned, Nostin kli tachas on the kabbanitzotzotz b'Shabbos. You can go ahead and put the utensil underneath your nair to receive sparks on Shabbos. Vein sarach lomar be'erev Shabbos, and of course it goes without saying that you can go ahead and put that secondary utensil underneath the nair on Erev Shabbos. V'lo yitain l'socho mayim mipnei shumechabe. It's me'erev Shabbos vein sarach lomar b'Shabbos, and you are not permitted to put water in that secondary utensil, even on Erev Shabbos. And it goes without saying that the same is true for Shabbos itself. So both says this is really quite dramatic. It sounds like that you can't halacha l'maisa put water in the secondary utensil, even Erev Shabbos. Ela Amar Ravashi afilu tema rabbanon shiny hacha mipnei shemekarev es kibuyav. Ultimately, again, I will say this case is different. Why? Because halacha lamaisa, you are hastening the extinguishing process. Rashi says, "Shemekarev es kibuyav zman kibuy lehedya v'havele mechabe mamish ihavi yoyev le b'Shabbos." So I will say, so ultimately, again, because you are hastening, ultimately, again, the extinguishing. Therefore, again, that's why it'll ultimately go ahead and be usher on Shabbos. So we'll say, so therefore, to do it on Shabbos is unequivocally usher. But apparently, it appears that even to do it erev Shabbos would be problematic as well. So we'll say, we'll see halacha lamaisa, that idea ultimately of kibui, and again, what you could do with causative extinguishing on Shabbos. And we'll see that in a couple of prakim from now. But I will say, but for our purpose, what emerges from this is you can go ahead and place that utensil ultimately again underneath the nair. But what does come out of something very interesting, that on Shabbos, in an ideal sense, we would avoid actively making something muktzah on Shabbos. To be mevatel kli mehechano, that you would avoid on Shabbos. The sparks doesn't cause a problem. Why? Because nitzotzos ultimately, again, less bahen mamish. The sparks don't have any real substance to them. Therefore, they're not mevatel the kli. Shkoach bos, we'll stop over here. Hadrun alach kira. May Meretz Hashem b'shal tova u'mitzlachas have the great zechus to begin the parak of Amet Tomnim. The next topic we're going to deal with is insulation. Insulation. This comes up all the time on Shabbos, with insulating pots, Erev Shabbos going into Shabbos, or for that matter on Shabbos itself. We'll begin that sugya tomorrow. Yeshikoach and Mazel Tov.